I am wondering, why are you here? Help you I can. Yes. You must unlearn what you have learned. That is why you fail.
Hello everyone, welcome back to The Slime. This week we're on episode 5, and we're going to be talking about why we dislike the new Star Wars films. As usual, I'm joined by Diego Pizarro.
Hi everybody.
Now, before we dive in, we just wanted to explain how this is all purely our opinions, and it's totally okay if you disagree with us. In fact, we enjoy the debate, so we encourage you guys to reach out and discuss with us your opinions on the Star Wars films through our YouTube comment sections or our Instagram page. We are huge Star Wars fans. We're pretty diehard, so without further ado, let's get into it, and we are going to get started by discussing episode 8. The Force Awakens. So when I throw the topic of The Force Awakens on you, Diego, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
I have a lot of good memories attached to it, a lot of excitement, a lot of hype. It reminds me of, as you said, how much we love Star Wars, which is why we're going to be brutal on these movies because we love Star Wars. There's very few movie series that I can dissect this way. And it's almost like a person that you've known for a long time. You know all their flaws, you know everything that's wrong with them, but you still enjoy, But The Force Awakens, a lot of high expectations. I feel like a lot of love that I had for this movie and still have is more associated with the memory of seeing it and the memory of the time when it was coming out, which was just a great time to be a Star Wars fan.
Yeah, it was a great experience. Star Wars hadn't been in the theaters for quite a long time, and a lot of people got to experience Star Wars on the big screen for the first time. And, all things considered, it wasn't a bad movie, and it isn't a bad movie. It's just really repetitive, and it kind of rehashes a lot of Episode 4, A New Hope. And that's people's biggest gripe with it, right?
Yeah, I mean, it is a blatant rip-off of A New Hope in a lot of ways. I mean, it starts with information being kept in a droid that has to be transported to people. And of course, once again, a planet-sized weapon has been created to destroy everything. I mean, I could almost respect, honestly, the nostalgia route they were going. If it was well executed, they were honest about it, and they kind of kept consistent. Because it's like, I don't have a problem with it if you're admitting it. If you don't take it too seriously and everybody knows what this is, I would have less of a problem with it. I probably still wouldn't like that it would be the last Star Wars movies to come out, basically.
Yeah.
But I could have accepted that a bit more.
And when you really think about it, like the plot of The Force Awakens is unbelievably similar to Episode 4. And like if we break it down a little bit, like you said, this map or these plans are inside a droid. And that droid crash lands on a desert planet, and it's picked up by our hero that doesn't know who they are or where they came from, and they come into big special power, and they run into Han Solo. They run into the same person. Like, it's just, and it keeps going and going and going. The inspirational figure to the protagonist ends up perishing, and it's a big rehash, but like, that must have been blatant. That must have been on purpose if 100%. It goes that deep, right?
Well, they know how the fan base is. They know the fan base is rabid. I don't think they were putting this out and thinking, oh, nobody's going to catch us. We're going to, get away with this.
Yeah.
I mean, and I almost wished, they probably would have got a bad response if they did this, but it's like I said, if they were honest and just said, we're kind of doing this updated version of Episode 4 for a new generation, I'd almost be willing to accept that more.
It's okay. And if they just wanted to get their toes wet, getting back into making Star Wars movies, this is a safe way to do it. I can't really be mad at it. And like, when it comes to all three of these new movies, I'm not mad at The Force Awakens. It is the one I can enjoy the most because it's just nostalgic. So there's a lot of negatives about it, but there's also some things we both really enjoy about it. But I think you made the point here that all of the great memories we have associated with The Force Awakens aren't from The Force Awakens, they're from other movies.
Yeah, that's basically it. There's potential with certain things in The Force Awakens, Finn in particular. We'll get to that.
Yeah.
And there's already some, but when you watch it back now with a more critical mindset, you're already seeing the beginnings of like weird things that they really didn't consider, like, you know, Finn's celebrating when he's killing stormtroopers.
Yeah, it's weird.
Which is weird. And it made me think while I was watching it, because I rewatched these 3 movies for this episode, and I was thinking, another thing they could have done with his character, they really could have done more with him feeling conflicted.
Yeah.
Like that could have been
It's
great.
a no-brainer.
Like had him like hesitating more because, you know, he could know in his heart of hearts that he wants to help the resistance, but
Yeah.
it could still be, they could show him having more of a struggle, you know, instead of just like, woo, you know, the second he
Yeah,
kills
it was so just
some guy he
weird
probably
that
knew.
These are all his friends that he was killing.
Yeah.
And he's just like, yeah, let's go. As he's just blasting, killing them. These are people that were his friends in the Empire and stuff. And it's a kid's movie though. That's why they don't dive into that.
it.
But if this movie was intended for, you know, to dive deep into like character development and whatnot, that would be a huge thing that they should have exploited, you know, showing us his resistance and why he wouldn't feel good about this and why he's conflicted, but he knows it's the right thing to do to turn on the First Order. That is something they should have explored, but nothing. We get nothing, and he's just there most of the time. This entire movie, he's just there, and he doesn't add anything at all. It's a big shame, in my opinion.
You know what I never really understood though nowadays is people always say, well, it's a kid's movie, and they're right to an extent, but I also feel like the people who are making these movies know that it's not just kids watching this movie. Like, it's become a bigger thing than that. Okay, in 1977, it was a kid's movie. None of the adults back then probably took it too seriously at all. I mean, all those people were born in like the 1920s and 30s.
But it was still mature. Like, it was serious.
It was mature.
Like, it's Star Wars isn't a comedy. Well, there are parts here and there that might make you chuckle. Star Wars is serious, and it's there's nothing like it. You know, Marvel movies, they could be taken lightheartedly, and Marvel movies kind of dog on themselves and make jokes because they know that the superhero stuff is kind of ridiculous, so you get that sense that it's a little bit softer, but not in Star Wars. Like, think about Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. Like, it's serious stuff, and it's all real stuff in this universe, and I feel like these new movies entirely miss the mark when it comes to the comedy and the tone. It just doesn't feel serious.
The comedy just feels off. It feels very close to Marvel humor, which
changes the entire tone,
which has taken over humor to a massive extent, which is really annoys me. But particularly in this movie, it sticks out. And that's one way that really takes you out of it. It just doesn't feel like Star Wars. And I also got to say, The Force Awakens begins my hatred of seeing desert planets in Star Wars, because little did I know in 2015 it was going to basically become all desert planets and all the TV shows and everything.
And why do they introduce Jakku, a new desert planet?
Yeah.
Why couldn't it just be Tatooine? If you're going to rehash it, why not use a place we're already familiar with?
That's what I mean. Know your audience. Like, you don't think there's going to be people like, we know it's Tatooine. Like,
exactly.
Just call it what it is.
And it's weird. I just feel like we're kind of jarred around a lot. Like, you're watching something that's new, but you're like, am I supposed to know this planet? Like, every time in Star Wars we see a planet, it's a place we're already familiar with and a place we know. And in this movie, location after location after location, they're all brand new, and nothing feels attached.
And there's nothing to make them stick out, right? You want to introduce new locations, great, but they got to make their mark.
They're not unique.
It's one thing the prequels is really able to do, was introduce new areas that really stick out, that you remember, that, you know, piqued your imagination when you were a kid. Jakku is Tatooine. You're not going to remember that name.
And, you know, like, they want to portray that it's lifeless, you know, but they did that before. What's that line that Luke says, like, if in the New Hope, if you're somewhere in the galaxy, this place is the furthest from the nicest. I'm not sure exactly what he says, but they make it obvious that you're on a desolate place, and they just do that again. So it's just weird. And after how many years, I'm not sure how many years we went without Star Wars movie in the theater. How many?
10 years.
Yeah. After 10 years, that's what we get, you know.
And they could have done the desolate planet differently too. Like, why does it have to be a desert? Is my question. You could have gone and shot in like Iceland. And if you've ever been to Iceland, it looks like this weird planet that just has barely any life on it. and is completely desolate, and they could have brought a new element. I mean, maybe I'm not thinking deep enough. Maybe there's a reason it has to be on a desert planet.
Stimulating, like the location has to be stimulating and has to have some kind of persona behind it.
But they want it to feel like old Star Wars, so everybody.
So they tried to make it feel like old Star Wars. Now, there are some great things about this movie. You know, I enjoy the character of Finn, even though I think they did not utilize him to his full potential at all. But having Han and Chewie back, you know, they're great. They play the characters really well. They feel like the same characters, and we get right into it. It feels great. My favorite aspect of the entire movie, though, is Kylo Ren and his entire character arc. I think he is, without a doubt, out of all these movies, we're talking about The Force Awakens right now, but between all these movies, Kylo Ren is hands down the best part of all of them.
Definitely the coolest and most original idea they had.
Yeah.
Was making the Sith more conflicted.
Yeah.
Instead of just, and they made more shades of gray. It's not so black and white with his character. Mm-hmm. And I mean, and I wanted to mention too, like right from the get-go, when they're first looking for BB-8, and you see Kylo Ren stop a laser with the Force. I like seeing some of those new uses of the Force, but I do kind of understand the complaint that they contradict the older movies a lot of the time.
These movies have a lot of those retcons where it's like, oh, why has nobody done that before? Why haven't we seen anybody do? And I think they just explain it as it's a rare Force ability.
And I thought it was cool when that was really striking in the theater and got me really excited when I first saw that.
They explain, oh, it's a rare Force ability, but then I'm pretty sure Rey does it in the next movie, and then everybody's doing it. So, you know, it's a new generation. There's got to be some new stuff, you know, and they did that with his new crossguard lightsaber, which everyone clowned on when it first came out. But come on, it's pretty cool, and it does change it up a bit, and it gives the character some more identity.
Yeah. And you see a slight advantage to it when he's fighting them and he gets like close to the shoulder.
Yeah.
And you see it burn them a little bit. Like you see a practical advantage there is to having a lightsaber.
Which is important. And now, like with the new books, they're exploring a time area that's they're called the High Republic, and then takes place before anything we've ever seen in the Star Wars universe. And they use these crossguard lightsabers. So it's explained that it is an ancient way to build your lightsaber, and Kylo Ren kind of dug that up, which is cool, you know, that they dive into the lore. Star Wars fans want that, so I appreciate that they did something like that.
How do you feel about him wearing a helmet? Like, I always think that was a bit too much. I don't know if that was necessarily needed, and to me it makes him look like a wimp. It makes him look weak, like right from the get-go, like he's just so desperate to be Darth Vader, he has to put on his little costume, and he's like, "Oh, I'm the evil guy." And
I definitely get that vibe from the first movie the most. It's just you don't need it, and you are. But I kind of appreciate that he is trying to be like his grandfather, right?
Yeah, that would be. Yes.
Yeah. He's trying to. His mom's
Leia.
His
grandfather.
His mom's Leia.
Why are we blanking right now?
Yeah. We know it was just a little, but yeah, he's trying to be like his grandfather. He's trying to be like Vader, and I like that. You know, Vader was this legend, you know, and this scary dark Sith figure, and he wants to be like him, and he wants to be powerful like him. So seeing him put this costume on, and it's cute, you know. And I like that because they can build on that, you know, in the next movie or so. We're going to get to that. But in the next movie, they had the potential to explore with him finding his own identity. Like, oh, he wanted to be like Vader. But now in the next movie, maybe he's going to try to find his own identity and break away from that. And to a certain extent, they do. But yeah, it was kind of funny. You know, it's just for promo, having that villain with the cool mask and whatever. People like that stuff.
It's identifiable. And they're like, oh, Darth Vader Part 2. You know, here we go. I got a question, just quick question.
Sure.
We don't spend too much time on it for you, but I remember when it first started, all this hype started coming around the new Star Wars movies. A lot of people were saying they should have not made all the expanded universe stuff non-canon.
Yeah.
And a lot of people said, well, if you use all this, it would have made the movies a lot better. At the time, I really disagree with that. I was like, let's just keep it compact. Like a through line from the original 3, because that's what worked. But I kind of think I was wrong.
Yeah. You know, the reason they mainly retconned all of the old books, all of the old games, there's tons of Star Wars lore that wasn't wasn't in a film or TV. You know, it was just books and games and such. The universe became really crowded, and if they wanted to explore new movies and whatnot, all those stories were already told in book form, so they didn't have a lot of room to tell stories because all these stories already existed. And if they wanted to make new movies, they'd just have to start over again. I completely understand that, and a lot of us might have wanted adaptations of these books.
But it can't be Marvel. Like, now that I'm thinking about it, if you were to do that, you'd have to make it more like an MCU kind of thing, because there would just be so much to cover.
You know, that Star Wars Legends was killed, you know. We're talking decades of lore and books that my parents read. My dad read these old Star Wars books that were the original sequels to the originals.
Yeah, well, it's all in that like 16-year gap between Return and Phantom. All this
and
stuff comes out.
That is what I would have liked to see the sequels become, is those those book adaptations and whatnot. But I completely understand why they started again and did their own thing.
And most people aren't at the end of the day and aren't going to want to see all that and do not care.
Yeah. So I completely understand why they retcon Star Wars Legends. But it's unfortunate, but it makes sense.
But part of me is still left wondering, could it have been better? Could it have separated itself from previous Star Wars incarnations?
You know, just like DC and Marvel's doing, they could have just said... all these Star Wars Legends take place in another timeline.
Yeah.
You know, and then that technically they're still canon. You know, they could still do something like that. That'd be crazy. But back to The Force Awakens. My biggest criticism of it, I think, is that Rey is not an interesting character.
No, not at all. Why do I care?
There's nothing about her that's interesting to me.
And it's not relatable. Right? Luke was so appealing to children because, you know, you saw him go through the trials and that was inspiring, and it's a good example for kids. And I'm not going to say Rey's a bad influence, but at the same time, it's like everything just kind of happens.
Is a cakewalk for her.
Yeah.
This becoming a Jedi and becoming a Force user was just a cakewalk for her, and there were no sacrifices on her end. You know, Luke was traumatized at the death of his parents. And that caused him, he had nothing anymore. I'm sorry, not his parents, Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru, you know, they were killed and he suddenly had nothing anymore. So he's like, okay, I'm going to dedicate my life to becoming this ancient Jedi warrior. I'm going to train to do that. That's his new purpose. And then the story starts. That's where it takes off. And there's no sacrifice for Rey here. You know, that kind of, who am I, Rey, who am I type of thing is just inserted. And it was fun to dive into those conspiracies, who is Rey, but I really don't care.
That was so fun about that time, though, because there were so many possibilities. There was so much talk about what was going to come. There were so many theories. But yeah, it's just not interesting at all. Like, and you kind of see Luke at the beginning acting like a spoiled child, you know, and getting angry and being more of just a relatable, like, I get what I'm supposed to be, like a teenager, early 20s, whatever.
Yeah.
Whereas Rey is like great attitude. She's got all the personality right at the beginning. She's climbing up this old Star Destroyer. And
she's already like well versed, and when it comes to combat, she can kind of already hold her own. Just the perfect protagonist, ready to go, start the journey. Like, and no negatives to her character at all. Just the perfect character.
And it's like, why
on
can't
paper?
and Star Wars was inspired by samurai movies. Why can't you have that arc where she's being trained? To me, that's such a part of its identity.
Yeah. I feel like these movies are so uninspired. You know, the original Star Wars films, like you said, were inspired by samurai films and Westerns.
Yeah. Flash Gordon as well.
Yeah. And these new Star Wars movies are inspired off of old Star Wars movies that were inspired off of. So, like,
that can get us into such a big topic. With all these reboots and sequels, I'm just going to say, what are movies going to look like in 30 years when they're inspired from things that are a remake
Yeah.
of something that already existed.
Movies that are inspired off of movies that are inspired off of other movies. It's just ridiculous.
Like, what are we headed towards?
It's hard to be original anymore, and
And there's an old director, Orson Welles. There's a clip I saw of him recently, and he was at a film school, and he's like, my biggest advice to filmmakers: don't watch too many movies. I hate homages. You watch too many movies, it's gonna influence how your movie is made, and everything's just gonna be repetitive. And I'm like, I feel like we're in that world.
Yeah,
he was
no,
like, right.
I feel that already for sure.
Because he was one of the first directors, so somebody like him would have saw barely any movies before he started.
Yeah.
Right? And now it's just everything is references on top of references, fan service on top of fan service.
I totally see the inspirations in A New Hope. Like, Obi-Wan is this old wizard and somewhat of a samurai warrior with mystery around them. And I get that, space opera, epic feel. And none of that is present in these new movies. They're just trying hard to be Star Wars, and that kind of brings me to the point that it's filled with fan service, and it's incredibly cheap.
Yeah, very, very cheap. Well,
you remember this? Look, remember this? You like this?
Well, literally, how they do the Millennium Falcon kind of feels like that.
Yeah, they even get you though in the trailer with the music, and the Millennium Falcon is flying, and Chewie, we're home. Like, they really just want to get you back in that seat. Not because you want to know where the story goes, but because you just want to see Star Wars stuff again.
Well, it's such an overcorrection from what the prequels were. And part of me just wants to make a controversial opinion. It's our fault. It's the fans' fault. We complained about the prequels.
It is to a certain extent, of course.
Relentlessly for years. So what else were they supposed to do but overcorrect and make something that's not going to stray at all?
Yeah. No, like, I totally agree. Like, we probably are incredibly picky fans that you can't please, but we're just having this conversation because it's fun to talk about these, because we both share an opinion and we feel very strong about these opinions. So it's just fun to like actually put this on record, our feelings on these movies, and just get everything out, right? Just for fun.
Yeah, of course. I just don't mind, taking a bit of the responsibility. I feel like Star Wars fans are hard to please. And there was always going to be a lot of backlash. I mean, that being said, I still believe these could have been done way better.
Yeah. It comes around also like how the plot points are the same as A New Hope. That's fan service, using a planet like Jakku that's similar to Tatooine. That's fan service. Bringing the lightsaber back. That's fan service. Bringing Han and Chewie back. Fan service. It goes
flashbacks.
The flashbacks is fan service. Having Obi-Wan, Ewan McGregor do a little voice snippet in the Force. Fan service, and more fan service.
Well, it's consume next product, right? That's what it feels like.
Yeah.
It's not meant to last, right? Because we noticed all these things as time went on. So it hasn't aged well. But in the moment, it really worked, and that's kind of Disney's MO. It's just like, get ready for next product. Let's go.
To be honest, when I think of The Force Awakens, it feels like it's frozen in time. Like, I can close my eyes and go back to the days The Force Awakens came out. I remember those times so well. So they did an amazing job bringing Star Wars back and getting people into it, because those memories are frozen in my head now.
This sounds crazy, but it almost makes me feel like The Force Awakens represents the kind of time when the world went crazy, like 2016. Right after it, everything just went nuts, and there's been all this crazy stuff happening ever since. And it's like, it feels like The Force Awakens almost represents this beacon of hope and all this potential we thought we had.
Chaos.
Yeah, only for life just to come and smack us in the face and be like, this is how it is now. Maybe I'm thinking about it too deeply, but
no, it's totally a good kind of analogy, to be honest. But I also felt like it was hard to get into these movies and get into the plot again, because there's a big time jump between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope, but they do the work to set it up. They show you this is Luke and Leia, this is where they're going to be living for the next 20 years. Here's Darth Vader, and he's going to start, being Darth Vader. 20 years passes, and all these characters are still where you left them because they set it up that way.
Yeah.
They got ready to do this time jump. And when Return of the Jedi ends, it's a time of peace.
Yep.
You know, the war is over and Luke is with his family. Everyone is together. And then when The Force Awakens starts, Luke is nowhere to be seen. Han is nowhere to be seen. Leia is nowhere to be seen. Chewie's nowhere to be seen.
Yeah.
Han and Leia had kids. We didn't even know that. It's just complete lost. Like, we're completely lost. We don't know how we got here at all. And that's not how I would have approached this.
No, and it leads to crappy dialogue where they're explaining everything for you.
They have to, and then that makes you feel stupid.
Yeah.
And
it just doesn't feel like realistic conversation.
yeah.
You know, people are more subtle in referencing memories and stuff like that.
You can't have a movie that where you ask too many questions. You know, I completely understand, like, you have questions as you're watching a movie, they're not answered yet, and that's where, like, tension comes from, and that's where, like, the movie kind of gets your nerves going and you want to know what the answer to this is. But I'm watching The Force Awakens and I have like 6, 7, 8 questions the entire movie, and the movie ends and none of those questions are answered. It's just, I don't know. It was not wise in my decision to start these new movies where they did in the timeline. I understand the characters got old.
Yeah,
know?
of course. Been a long time. 30 years, right?
You know, the cast got old, so they kind of had to. There's always a better way. There's a better way to approach that.
Well, all those things they explained feel like they should have been movies in the late 80s and early 90s.
Mm-hmm. Everything that happened off camera in that time jump would have made way better movies than these ones.
Yeah.
You know, that whole story about Kylo Ren turning to the dark side and destroying Luke's Jedi Academy, that would have been a way better movie.
Amazing.
Than this. You know, the plot of The Force Awakens seems insignificant compared to that.
Yeah. But
that's
it
what
was,
we want to see.
Yeah, but they could have never happened back then. Like, it's not like you can do something like the MCU and have this guy play the same character for 10 years. It wasn't like that back then. It would have been horrible for all their careers. And let's be honest, other than Harrison Ford, most of these actors' careers severely really downgraded after Star Wars. So imagine if they tried to make another 3 movies. Disaster.
Too many important things happened off screen, in my opinion. So that's where I want to leave that. You know, and in conclusion to The Force Awakens, it just could have been a way better reintroduction to Star Wars.
Yeah.
But this reintroduction starts and we're just confused as to where are we? What happened? What's going on? Who are you? Where are all the people I know? I don't recognize anything. You know, that's not really how you reintroduce something, in my opinion. You want people to feel the nostalgia, but not in the way that they did it. It just seems cheap the way that they did it.
You want it in a more subtle way.
Yeah.
More of a vibe, more than anything else.
So that brings us to The Last Jedi.
The controversial one, probably.
We didn't mention that The Force Awakens was written and directed by J.J. Abrams.
It's important to know.
Because now that we're at The Last Jedi, that has changed. And it's important to note The Last Jedi is written and directed by Rian Johnson. And he had complete, I don't know if you know this.
Yeah, he had like total control.
Complete creative control to do and change whatever he wanted. No rules. You're on the 8th Star Wars film and you have no one's telling you what you have to do.
Which is weird.
You can change whatever you want. That is just unbelievable. Where's the respect for
way to give him a big head.
The past 40 years of storytelling.
And it's just weird to me because it's not like The Force Awakens was a bomb. It's not like it got poorly received.
Yeah.
So what was the problem?
In my opinion, Rian Johnson should have directed, and that's it. No creative writing control. The script should have been given to him, and he gets to direct it. Because it has to be cohesive, like we talked about on this show. It has to be cohesive, and if you're telling a new trilogy, there has to be a beginning, middle, and end. And there is a beginning, middle, and end, but you're jarred around, and it's just The Last Jedi retcons every single subplot that is set up in The Force Awakens, and it deals with every subplot that was set up in The Force Awakens in this one movie. Why did this movie have to answer all of our questions?
Yeah, it's so rushed. And I mean, I was open to the idea of having different directors because that's what the original trilogy did. But I don't believe they had as much to do with the writing. I feel like the only difference you notice between directors was maybe like tone.
Yeah.
Like I know the guy who did
why.
Return of the Jedi, he did like more romantic movies, and you can kind of see that.
Yeah, I can see
in Return of the Jedi, you can see like why they picked him. It's the brighter movie, right? And you know, and then I would say you can see a lot of obviously George Lucas's touch in in A New Hope. But yeah, I think they gave him way too much control, more than previous directors had had.
You know, I just feel like he tried so hard to make his presence known that he is in control now. Luke returns and dies in the same movie. Yeah. And we don't even get any time to really understand the character that well. We get a flashback or two as to why he is the way he is, but there's 20 years of Luke's life missing here, and he just shows up, teaches this new kid a few things, and then poof, he's gone.
And he cheapens the death of this big moment.
He's a legend, man. Luke is a legend.
Should have been a massive, massive moment.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I feel like they even did that with Han Solo's death. It didn't feel as dramatic as it really could have been. But
you know, I'm okay with Han Solo's death. You know, he tried to bring his son back. It didn't work. That's okay. Not everything has to work. And that's fine.
It's nowhere near as ridiculous as Luke's. Don't get me wrong.
It's. I mean, when I was watching The Last Jedi in the theater, and Luke was standing up to all these AT-ATs. I don't know what the hell they're called. They're not AT-ATs anymore. They're knockoffs, but whatever. Luke standing up to all these AT-ATs, and I was nervous. There was so much tension in me, and all these AT-ATs blast on Luke while he's standing there, and I'm like, holy shit, he's dead. I'm like, no way. And you know, gotcha. It's a force projection. Yeah.
They get really fast and loose, by the way, with these new force abilities. Like, they start using them way too much.
We'll get to that.
We will get to that
in the next film, Rise of Skywalker. But The Last Jedi was the first, you know, I just talked about how The Force Awakens didn't feel a lot like Star Wars, but that really sets in The Last Jedi. It does not feel like Star Wars, you know. Everything is way too shiny, way too perfect, and Star Wars is a lived-in, gritty universe. And The Last Jedi, just everything seems polished and perfect, and every
place they go,
it feels like it's separate from the Star Wars universe.
Well, to compare it to the originals again, I mean, me and you were talking about recently, like in Empire Strikes Back with like Dagobah is a really one I like to use. When you see that set, you feel the humidity, like the atmosphere is there, like they really get it right. And
guys, just think about Empire Strikes Back and Dagobah. You know, just think about that for 1 second here. That planet, you know, the atmosphere, and Luke and Yoda and the way that they interact with their environment around them. And now think about an environment from The Last Jedi. You know, this salt flats planet, you know. I don't feel anything. There's not one location in these new films that is unique to me at all. You know, it's cool. The visual design of The Last Jedi is stunning. You know, it is a visually stunning movie. There's some really cool ballsy designs that they do, and I'm a fan of how visually different the movie is, but not as the 8th Star Wars film. It's just so drastically different than everything else.
The only thing I'll say to that argument, though, I feel like people would have said that about the prequels back in the day. Yeah, because they really do not feel like Star Wars if we're comparing them to the original trilogy.
And that's fair. We've talked about that before. Why does the prequels feel like technology is way more advanced when it takes place before all these movies.
Yeah, I know there's a reason for that, but even just aside from that, I find if you just went into the theater to see a Phantom Menace and you only knew the first three, even just how the worlds look, and I just don't feel it doesn't feel like that same vibe.
I don't know, man. I'm really getting on the side of wanting to defend the prequels more because
I agree with you. I'm just, I'm just saying I feel like we have some biases with them.
But like you just painted that picture, like you saw the original films in the theater and now you're in the theater to see the Phantom Menace for the first time. It must have felt whimsical and
Yeah,
like
that's true as well.
This ancient time where all the Jedi had a complete council and these space wizards, and it's felt like a whimsical time.
Probably the most fantasy-esque feeling.
Exactly. It was way more fantasy and dreamt up, and that's cool because it takes place way before everything else. But I don't understand. Also, hold on.
Brain's going a million miles a minute.
Yeah, exactly. The original trilogy ends with the Empire being destroyed. And then this new sequel trilogy begins with there's an entire new army in control of the entire universe.
Another one, yeah.
Where did this army come from? Who funded it? Where did all these stormtroopers, these people come from? Like, it's just crazy.
Well, and
because it's not the
30,
Empire.
And it's been, what, like 30, 40 years in the timeline since the original trilogy, something like that?
Yeah.
Okay, so this
20.
new Empire, First Order, whatever you want to call them, comes around. And they're like, let's do the exact same thing that these people did 30, 40 years ago. That's like
Just
us.
a fan club.
Yeah, that's like us now being like, you know how politicians did things in the 80s and 90s? Let's do that now. Let's just
try 'em
redo
again.
that all again.
Let's try
It'll
it
work.
again.
It'll work.
I don't get it. That was the biggest thing for me. I remember that when the new sequels came out, seeing like stormtroopers again and everything. I'm like, they all died. I understand the galaxy was spread out, and they're exploring that in the Mandalorian. Some Imperials are still alive, and there's Imperial remnants and remnant troopers and whatnot. But where did this huge, massive army just come from? And how did they, within 20 years, mine an entire planet and put an entire huge big super laser in this planet that would have took hundreds of thousands of years to build? It's unbelievable.
And maybe I'm getting too serious.
Yeah, it's a fantasy film. It's a sci-fi fantasy film.
I just want to say, how do you economically, not to get too serious, but how do you economically recover from two moon-sized planets being destroyed? Like, that would... The space economy cannot fund another planet-sized weapon.
I remember watching these videos where it was like, how much does it cost to make the Death Star? And it was like $500 trillion to make the amount of money to make the Death Star doesn't exist. And they made two of them, it got destroyed, and now they made an even bigger one. Where does all this money come from? Are they just printing money? I don't think they could print money fast enough to make a planet-sized laser that could wipe out an entire galaxy in one shot. It's just comical.
Have you seen that parody video on YouTube where the guy argues that the rebels are the ones on the wrong because they're terrorists who blow up this weapon that every planet in the system invested in, and now they've crashed the entire economy and blah, blah. I love that video.
Like, the rebels are just these little shitheads that just keep destroying the government and the economy.
Well, what if some like rogue rebel state from like somewhere else came and destroyed all our military, all of NATO's military stuff? We'd be pretty mad.
The rebels are a bunch of shitheads.
But we're getting too serious now. We're getting too adult.
It's hilarious though. But yeah, The Last Jedi, I can respect it for being different, but it feels extremely disjointed from the rest of the Star Wars universe. And a lot of people are not going to ever accept this movie and these movies as canon in the Star Wars universe because it is just really hard to see them. They don't flow into each other. Will we get some content that explains the time jump a bit more? Yeah, they're exploring that area right now in TV shows, like Star Wars Rebels and Rogue One, The Mandalorian, all these Solo, all these movies and TV shows start to fill in that gap. But a lot of stuff happened between the originals and these new movies.
And there's some respectable things about The Last Jedi. I mean, you mentioned like it kind of tries to have its own identity with the color, with the red.
Yeah.
in the white.
Yeah, that's at least when I think that movie that I get that I get
yeah.
that sense of identity. I think they did something right there.
And like, Snoke's room looks really cool.
Yeah.
Even though that's one of the worst choreographed fight scenes, but that's been said
That
enough
room
times.
is ridiculously designed too. It's just gratuitous.
We're getting too nerdy though. This is like
No, that's what this is, though.
I know it's just so nitpicky, but it's true. We got a lot of issues with these movies.
Yeah. Just too many retcons in The Last Jedi. They had to address everything within this one movie. Why did they have to? The biggest one being this huge mysterious character of Snoke. Is he a Sith Lord, an ancient Sith Lord? Is he a character we know that has now become damaged and a lot powerful? I don't know. They don't tell us.
Yeah,
They just kill him.
and yeah.
And then you're like, oh, Kylo's going to turn to the good side now. He can. No, he
Nope.
doesn't. Doesn't phase him at all.
We'll get to how they solve that later. But
But then they make backstory on how Snoke more or less raised Kylo since he was like a teenager. And he doesn't care. He just murders him, brutally murders him,
he's
and
done
doesn't.
that 3 of his parents in this so-called parents in this movie.
On paper, Kylo Ren is a monster.
Well, and it's also like, for a guy who's supposed to be conflicted, you seem to be pretty comfortable with just killing the people who raised you.
You ever see those SNL skits, like Matt the radar technician?
Oh, not in a long time.
It's Adam Driver, and it's like he's playing Kylo Ren, but it's like undercover boss. And he just has anger issues, and he's just killing all the stormtroopers and whatnot. No, it's funny. Like, we know that that's the big jump, the big goof is that he has a temper issue. It's
Well, and I also wanted the Leia stuff, like in that I don't think is addressed very well. Yeah.
she
Just
dies,
out
but
in
she
space,
doesn't
she's
die,
dead.
and then she flies through space.
Which, whoops, they probably should have let her die in the movie, but
Yep.
not knowing what would happen, rest in peace.
You know, when Kylo Ren shot, because he shot the ship with his TIE fighter, when I saw that happen in the theater, because Carrie Fisher had passed before The Last Jedi came out, so I'm like, oh, damn, that's how they're going to kill her. And then she doesn't die, and I'm like, what?
That's what I'm saying. They should have just done it there. Like,
Yeah.
that's perfectly fine.
I don't know why they had her fly. She flew like Superman, which is weird. I mean, we only ever saw Count Dooku kind of glide before with the Force.
That's about it.
Real goofy stuff. That's a huge way, usually they would introduce, that's the first time it showed us that she can use the Force.
Yeah.
We knew she had the Force to a certain extent, but that's the first time they showed us it, and it just made me laugh. I laughed out loud.
Yeah,
in the
and
theater
talk about a big way, like for her first act. Like, why couldn't they do subtle things maybe before?
Yeah.
That's
They
such a
could have
big way
hinted
to
at
do
it more, for sure.
And this also, I would say, Last Jedi kind of begins them introducing characters that you're like, why? Or that are just annoying. I mean, not to pile on Rose anymore, but like that's just one example. Like, you're kind of like, why are they here? I don't want to disrespect the actress. She's a fine actress, whatever, but...
Yeah, the entire thing with Finn and Rose, I understand they had to do something the entire movie while Rey kind of just diddy-daddled with Luke and whatnot, but it just, you know how movies bounce between scenes, like this character is over here and this character is over here, and it bounces between showing what these characters are doing at the same time in different places. I didn't care. I didn't care about any of them. I didn't care what Rey was doing, and I didn't care what I was
really
not there for this movie. I wasn't there for it. The only good aspect of this movie, in my opinion, the only redeeming qualities about this movie, in my opinion, is how it has its own visual identity and Kylo Ren.
Yeah, which even they could have...
It starts the arc of Kylo Ren wanting to be his own person.
Yeah.
And I like that a lot.
Could have made him one of the best characters in the whole franchise.
And look, guys, I don't have a huge problem with them killing Snoke. It doesn't make me mad or upset. That's the creative decision they want to do, okay. But I don't think it did anything for the characters. It didn't move the characters forward anymore.
And I didn't have enough time with Snoke to be like,
Yeah.
oh my God. Like,
Yeah.
just, and he always, I'm not saying he's terrible, but he always just kind of felt like a generic, this is going to be this
Yeah,
series
but there is
Palpatine.
an unbelievable amount of mystery surrounding this character.
That's also true. Well, I
So-
remember people saying he was going to be Mace Windu.
They were like, oh, maybe he's Mace Windu. He's all scarred, and maybe he's Palpatine. Or there were some crazy, crazy theories about who Snoke was.
It's a pretty white Mace Windu. That's all I'm going to
Yeah,
say.
it makes no sense. The theories that people had about these things. That's why it was fun. It was fun at the time when these movies were coming out to theorize and watch these Star Wars theory videos about
Yeah.
who Rey is and who Snoke is. And I enjoyed those aspects of when these movies were coming out, being involved in all that. I don't know. It
Oh,
was,
and I still want to mention Admiral Holdo. That's her name.
yep.
Like, that's another one. Like, what is up with that? The logic of that whole sequence just doesn't make a lot of
Yeah.
sense to me. Why they have to
So-
keep things from Poe and all this.
Because Leia is in ICU because
Yeah.
of her little flying maneuver. Holdo, this Admiral Holdo now is calling the shots in the Resistance, and she has this plan, and the First Order is chasing them through space, and they're stuck. They have nowhere to go, and everyone's looking to Holdo. What are we gonna do? What are we gonna do? And she's just not telling them what her plan is. So they're like, okay, if you don't have a plan, we're gonna remove you from this, and we're gonna
Yeah.
make her. Why? It just makes no sense at all why she wouldn't let any of the characters in as to her plan. They're on the same side.
And also, what I don't understand is we were supposed to like her in the end, but I'm like, she treats Poe like a dick right
Yeah,
from the beginning.
she does.
And it's like, we like Poe. We've been with him for a while now. Why are you introducing this new character who we're immediately going to hate because she's just being an ass to this character we like?
Yeah,
And we're supposed to like her at the end of it, all of it? Like,
and everybody knows what they were trying to do
yeah.
between these two characters, but it was not working. It didn't, because it didn't make any logical sense.
And there's no nuance to it.
You know, exactly. She should have pulled Poe aside and been like, keep it on the low, but I actually do have a plan, and it's a pretty good plan. And then Poe would be like, okay, I got you. I trust you. It just, there's no explanation as to why she didn't do that.
It's just for them to make a point. We all know the point we're making.
Yeah.
Not that it's a bad message. It's
It
just
wasn't handled properly.
you don't have to be so on the nose too. Like,
Yeah.
one of the beautiful things about movies that have a message is they kind of make you come to that conclusion. It's not
Exactly.
just so obvious. Then it just feels like I'm being lectured.
That message that they're trying to convey is more than welcome, but they made her a really hateable character.
Yeah, big time.
Nobody enjoys this character or likes her that much, and she's really short-lived. And it creates this weird, they don't really understand the difference, like what light speed is and what hyperspace is. They really messed up because it's not traveling really fast through space. You enter a wormhole and you exit somewhere else.
Yeah.
That's what it is. And she just flies right into them. It's like, that's not how it works. That's crazy.
I'd love to see
though.
people's faces in the theater when that first
That's
happened
crazy
again.
though.
It's
This is a
insane.
real Star Wars movie, and they got the rules wrong of hyperspace travel.
Yeah, and people
it-
will be like, well, suspend your disbelief. And it's like, yeah, you suspend your disbelief, but the things that happen have to make logical sense within that universe.
Exactly.
That's the rule.
Yeah.
And that doesn't.
It
Flips the whole thing on its head. What the hell?
And then, first of all, yeah, that's not how hyperspace works. And then, second of all, where's your explanation as to why everyone hasn't been shooting ships at
Yeah.
each other for the past thousands of years the Star Wars universe has existed? Why did it take up until now for someone to decide they're going to launch a ship at some? The Death Star was a massive, huge target. It would have been so easy to just shoot one X-Wing into the Death Star
Yeah.
and boom. But how are they going to explain? They're like, oh, it was a 1 in a million shot. How? Thanks for
You're telling me
explaining
nobody
nothing.
accidentally crashed into another ship before and it got destroyed,
Yeah.
and they were like, "Oh,
Yeah.
we can do that."
They and they knew that they messed up. So when the Rise of Skywalker came, they had a character say, "Oh, we can't pull that off. It's a 1 in a million shot." Why? Tell us. I know they're trying to acknowledge the plot hole, but hello, tell us why, and instead of just throwing a broad blanket over it and just calling it a day. They explained it without explaining it.
And then they dug the grave even further by dismissing any criticism whatsoever, and just made you out to be a bad person if you didn't like this new Star Wars movie.
Yeah, it's okay to dislike stuff or like stuff. Like, if you like these movies, like, great. I'm glad that you like them. It's amazing to enjoy something, and if you enjoy it, freaking enjoy it. Like,
I don't understand it, but all the power to you, right?
Yeah. There are things I enjoy that other people don't like, but that's the way things are.
And I don't know. Like, to me, it's just I don't get complaining when the hardcore fan base doesn't like it, because it's like they're going to buy it anyway, whether they like it or not. They're going to buy all the toys if they're that hardcore. So it really doesn't matter at the end of the day whether they like it or not.
Yeah.
They're just so dedicated. It's like a sports team, right? And they know that. But
The Last Jedi starts the pattern of these movies bouncing all over the place. And so to kind of close off the talk on The Last Jedi, it's really important to mention how the resistance, the Republic resistance, is whittled down to like 10 people by the end of the movie. The entire resistance is killed, and Luke Skywalker is dead, and there are 10 people to the resistance, and they're fucking smiling and laughing.
Yeah. It's just laughable.
How? And like the resistance got their asses handed to them the entire movie. It's terrible, and they're laughing and smiling at the end, like 1,000 people didn't just die.
And Star Wars can do unhappy endings.
Tell me about it.
Done it before. Revenge of the Sith. Revenge of the Sith.
Revenge of the Sith.
Perfect example.
Empire
Strikes Back does it really well. These kind of ominous, darker endings,
Yeah.
and those are kind of the two. They're the two most beloved out of those trilogies.
Yeah.
Revenge of the Sith is considered the best out of the prequels, and
Yeah.
Empire Strikes Back is generally considered the best out of the first three.
Like, this movie,
do it.
yeah, they did. This movie's dark. Like, on paper, The Last Jedi is really a really dark movie, but it's not conveyed as dark at all.
Yeah.
They just not have the guts to fully embrace that it's darker. I don't know.
That may be the kids thing coming in there. I don't know, but I watched Revenge of the Sith as a kid, and I didn't have like a crisis and become a nihilist. You know, it's just, which is another movie. Like, kids aren't going to think about it like that. It can be dark. You know?
So that's how it ends. You know, the resistance is, all of them are murdered. There's 10 good guys left in the galaxy, and that brings us to the Rise of Skywalker.
Oh man,
The Rise of Skywalker starts with a time jump. I think about a couple of years. So all those people that died, they now have a lot more. They're all back. You know, the resistance is whittled down to 10 people, and since there's a time jump, well, they're not whittled down to 10 people anymore. They're back in full force.
this movie is a mess right from the get-go.
Rise of guys, like, the Rise of Skywalker makes The Last Jedi look great.
Basically, makes both movies that came before it look great.
So if you follow our YouTube and our Instagram, you'll see this clip that we posted of Diego and I talking about how every trilogy now ends with Palpatine electrocuting himself. Just a quick refresher. Revenge of the Sith, he deflects Mace's lightning into his own face. The original trilogy, Darth Vader picks him up and he goes spazzy and just shoots lightning everywhere, electrocuting himself, Vader. And now in The Rise of Skywalker, he shoots his lightning at Rey and she just shoots it right back. Like, how has he not, like...
The Palpatines just really don't seem to have a good grasp on the lightning, because even Rey messes up with it, if you remember.
She's deflecting it back at you. Stop shooting her with lightning. She's just shooting it back at you. Just stop. You're hurting yourself.
It's supposed to be their signature thing. Oh my God. I just want to say, the opening title crawl, you read it and I'm like, Shouldn't this be
What
Fallen
is it?
Return of the Jedi or
What does
something?
this say? The dead speak?
Yeah, the dead speak, and now like
Because Palpatine hopped on a PA system and spoke over the whole galaxy,
Yeah,
just
and-
to let everyone know he's alive.
and it's just back, and I'm like, okay, so is this the fourth movie, Fallen Return of the Jedi? That's what it feels like, and it also just feels like they're pulling stuff out of their ass.
Well, you guys have heard it 1,000 times before. Palpatine's back, and that retcons Vader's sacrifice, Anakin's sacrifice, that he was the chosen one after all, and he did bring balance. Well, nope, he didn't.
Well, like, what a great arc that was, and they just wrecked it
That
within
was
the
a
first title crawl.
movie character arc.
Not even on the beginning of the movie, in the trailer.
Yeah, in the trailer they retcon it.
The disrespect.
Yeah,
The audacity.
Six movies of character development and just under 40 years of lore, and Vader's sacrifice meant nothing now. It was a last ditch effort, don't you think?
Oh, for sure. They just wanted...
Because sorry, also to jump back in,
Yeah.
how the last one, it was the first one, Force Awakens, was J.J. Abrams. The Last Jedi is Rian Johnson. Now, for some reason, J.J. Abrams is back.
And he's like, what do I do best? Fan service. Let's go. Palpatine's back. Everybody, come to the theater.
But could you imagine how frustrating it'd be for J.J. Abrams? Like, he wrote 3 of these Star Wars films, and some random douche just gets to do the one in between 1 and 3.
This guy who made the Fly episode in Breaking Bad is going to do this Star Wars movie, and he's going to mess all my work up.
Yeah, so J.J. Abrams had to come back and be like, this guy ruined my plans for this entire trilogy. Where do I go from here? I don't know where I would go from there.
No. I don't know how you clean up that mess.
I don't know if it's true. I think it was. I don't know. So do not quote me on this. But I heard and saw concept art that the original script for The Rise of Skywalker began with like Finn, Rey, and Poe infiltrating a First Order base. The movie just starts, and the 3 of them are like in deep in a base.
Kind of like Revenge of the Sith.
Yes,
it kind of just starts, and they're in the thick of it, and it's this big
exactly. And you see the characters running or whatnot, and then boom, the camera comes on to Rey, and she's wearing a black Jedi suit, very reminiscent of Luke's in Return of the Jedi. And then boom, she has a double-bladed blue lightsaber. It's like, that's how you do a time jump. It's like, damn, 2 years has passed, and look where she is now. Why didn't they do it? Why did they play it safe? Why didn't... That would have been epic. That would have been... I would have been there for that. And I bet you guys listening, that sounds pretty epic, doesn't it?
That sounds amazing. Sounds better than what they did. And honestly, I don't even mind the kind of opening sequence with Poe and Finn.
Yeah.
And Chewbacca. It's not bad. I think it was pretty fun, but that sounds way better.
Yeah. And then they kind of mess around again with the beginning of The Rise of Skywalker with jumping in and out of hyperspace. I don't know what that was about.
It really and then you see these kind of cool worlds for like 5 seconds, and you're like, "What's that?" Oh, I'm really interested in what that is. Okay.
I don't. And
it felt like Monsters Inc. when they're going through the doors. Yeah. There's all these different. That's what it reminds me of. They like in Paris, and then they're on the beach. That's what this feels like.
Wow, what a way to start a movie, jolting you around again. These movies love to just toss you around. It's unbelievable.
But I gotta say, that opening, I knew it was stupid and it's not great, but it held my interest. Then it cuts to Rey with the rocks, and I'm like, I don't care. I'm already bored. I'm over it.
Because the number one complaint was everything just came really easy to Rey. So they got to show her training a little bit. That explains everything. Is that supposed to explain why she's so powerful? Look, she's training. She's floating rocks. Now you guys get your explanation as to why she's so powerful, because she practices. Yeah, no, I don't think so.
No.
But this plot picks up, and I think you've seen this one or two more times than I have. But It is a huge fetch quest. You know, they're going to get this Sith Wayfinder, and then they're at some parade, and then Lando shows up, and then she finds this dagger. And
Oh my
then
god! I sent a snap to you saying,
Yeah, you did.
I'm rewatching this. Not even 20 minutes in.
Yeah.
And it's like Palpatine's back. He came back to life and he's living on this secret world and you have to
Yeah.
get this Wayfinder to find him. And it's like, oh my God.
And then if you want to find the Wayfinder, you need to find this dagger. So in order to find this dagger, you need to go to this planet and talk to this person. And then this person will guide you here. And then they fall in a sinkhole. And then...
Is this a pirate movie? Is this like a mystery,
Yeah, I
like treasure hunt,
know.
scavenger hunt thing?
And I kind of like thought of this like this way that I think of this movie now. The Rise of Skywalker is like a video game. You know, it's you have this main objective, but in order to get there, you have side quests you have to complete. And I feel like Rey is just completing side quests this entire movie with her two companions. You know, like in video games, you have followers and companions that help you along your journeys. Finn and Poe. That's their only purpose in this movie, is to just follow Rey around. Finn just screams Rey's name every 2 seconds. And then, like in a video game, Rey is unlocking new powers every 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Like,
It's a great comparison, right?
it is so just comical. Like, do they think we don't have an attention span, that we need something new and shiny every 15 minutes to keep us entertained?
It feels so contrived. And it's not about the characters anymore at all.
No.
Like it's
It's
not
not.
character driven at all in
No.
this movie. That's all we can do is sigh.
More retcons. Palpatine isn't dead. Palpatine is Rey's grandpa. Luke's character is gone. He's dead. Retcon. Kylo Ren rebuilds his mask again. So it retcons the entire become your own person plot that was really great that they did for Kylo. Well, they undid that, and he's back to wearing his mask for no reason.
Wasted two characters that could have been so great. It's a shame.
You know, they made us think that Rey is a nobody, and then they tell us that she's a nobody. Well, no, she's actually Palpatine's granddaughter, and Snoke is actually a clone of Palpatine. I'm actually pretty sure that they explained it, that they were using Luke's hand that was severed in Bespin or whatnot to create these clones, but nothing is clear.
Well, it feels like you can really tell that this wasn't the plan
Yeah.
back in 2015.
And there was, I don't know if you remember that episode of The Mandalorian. I believe it was in season 2. I think it was like episode 6 or whatnot. Grief Karga, Cara Dune, and the Mandalorian are in an Imperial base, and they stumble upon clones of Snoke just in these Bacta tanks. And it's just because they're trying to write it into the lore. They're trying to, you know, let us believe that this was the plan all along, when I know it was just they're just trying to piece together
Well, it feels
how this makes sense.
It feels like they're coming up with it as they
That's
go
what
along,
I'm trying to say.
right?
Yeah.
Like that's what the movie feels like, because it's just jumping from.
It
thing to
does
thing.
feel like they shot a scene and then they're like, okay, what next?
Yeah.
They're like, what next? Every scene is just jumping around planet to planet to planet. We got Exegol. We got that jungle planet. We got that desert planet again, another desert planet that's not Tatooine or Jakku. We get this water planet and that's 4 planets right there. And you must know they're all meaningful, because I can't name a single one of them.
And we're not counting the jumps either.
What do you mean?
Are you counting all the jumps too in the opening scene? Those could all count.
Oh
for
yeah,
different
those can
worlds
count,
too that are all shown for 5 seconds.
You know, I don't even want to talk about the Rise of Skywalker that much, because it's such a mess. It's hard to dissect this movie because it's such a mess.
And this is when the comedy becomes really obnoxious and apparent. That's when I really started to notice it, and it really started to get on my nerves.
Do you want to talk about Finn now?
Man, Finn. Well, we're not allowed to talk about why he wasn't used more.
Yeah,
There's a reason that he's not used
You
more.
know, for certain reasons, certain movies don't do well in certain parts of the world based on certain things. So, because of these complications, they didn't have Finn, the main protagonist in the forefront, even though he is an infinitely more interesting character than Rey. This movie just solidifies that Finn has been around for these 3 movies and he has no purpose at all.
And it's really unfortunate.
I will always stand beside the argument that Finn should have been the protagonist. Can you just hold on? Let me just pitch this, because and I know it's been pitched 1,000 times. This is not my idea by any means, but can you imagine if these new movies consisted of Finn being a stormtrooper and he makes the decision to leave the First Order, which hurt him because those are his friends and his family. He was part of the First Order, but once he decides it's the right thing to do, he finds out he has a Force sensitivity. And
that would line up as to why he felt conflicted about it in the first place.
And he ends up finding this droid, BB-8, that leads him to Luke. And he's like, then you have the same story really as Rey. He's looking for guidance, and it might make Luke raise his eyebrows that this ex-stormtrooper is now here. And it's just infinitely more interesting. And now I've seen concept art of like Finn, and he's like a Jedi, but he's like wearing like stormtrooper pauldrons and whatnot. It's just so much more interesting, and it was so much. It could have been so much more than Rey. Like, Rey was just a hollow wooden character that just progressed the plot along, but Finn had some substance to him.
Well, can you imagine the payoff too? Like in The Force Awakens, he's so scared and conflicted, and it makes a goofball of himself. And then what if by this 3rd movie he's like this strong Jedi? Like, that payoff would have been incredible. And speaking of only there to advance the plot, I mean, this movie is full of characters like that. I mean, the one that stuck out to me was Zori, I believe, the Spice Runner.
Zora Bliss?
Yeah, Zora, right?
I don't know.
And she's associated with Poe, and then they go onto this planet because she can help them translate the Sith code from C-3PO, and then she hates them. And then and then 5 seconds goes by, and she's like, oh, now she's all sympathetic for them. She's helping them out. She gives Poe her blessing, and it's like, oh, you go, fight, and all this. And just, you literally there just to advance the plot. You have no personality.
Yeah.
Waste. And it's frustrating.
I really don't understand any of this movie. And it's tough to watch. It's, like I said, it's all over the place.
Well, and then should we talk about the ending where Rey and Kylo Ren kiss? And then...
Yeah. Let's get to that, though. Before we get to that, there's this final fight with Palpatine, and like I said, he electrocutes himself, but it's also ridiculous that they strap a Death Star gun on 1,000 Star Destroyers.
Yeah,
all these Star Destroyers bust out of the ice. 1,000 Star Destroyers bust out of the ice, and they all have a planet-destroying laser weapon on them. And Palpatine, this has been his big scheme for the past 20 years, and...
Couldn't have done that before? Done that to Star Destroyers before instead of building a moon-sized planet?
I shit you not. Palpatine shoots lightning through the ceiling he's on the ground of this planet, and there's a battle going on like in the atmosphere, and Palpatine just shoots his lightning into space.
And they're fighting in that stadium full of Siths, whatever they're supposed to.
Yeah, I don't know, man.
It looks like a soccer game. Looks like a soccer game in hell.
And then they kind of commit genocide again and kill everyone in this arena like they do. But yeah, let's skip this whole talk about this ridiculous ending.
Laughable.
Whatever. Kylo Ren gets a vision, a meeting. Han appears to him, and Leia has a Force connection with him. Kylo Ren is now Ben Solo. He's a good guy now. And then he comes back, and Ben Solo and Rey are ready to fight the Emperor. They fight the Emperor, and Rey dies. and Ben Solo, apparently they share a dyad, like they're connected to each other through the Force. So you tell me, you tell me what happens.
Well, isn't he like they kiss? And
They kiss.
True love's kiss.
Yeah, he kisses her dead body. Ben Solo gives his life for Rey. So Rey dies, and then he brings her back to life. They kiss, and then he dies.
That's laughable.
You know, that's it. That's it. You know, I really think Rey should have died, and then Ben Solo and Finn started Jedi Academy together.
But even that, I wouldn't have felt that great about. Like,
but it's still better.
It's better, yes.
It's still better, and it wouldn't have saved anything, but it still would have been better. And now Rey she's a Palpatine, and she's just roaming the galaxy now. The most powerful being in the universe. That's how they explain Rey is the most powerful Force user ever. She's just
but she's not
tobogganing down the hills of Tatooine.
Yeah. But she's not a Palpatine, guys.
You're right. She's a Skywalker.
She's a Skywalker.
Dude, and it bothers me. Like, she just called herself a Skywalker. Nobody told her, like, can you please carry on the name of Skywalker? Can you please? No, she just, I'm Rey Skywalker.
Yeah.
Like,
and why does a Palpatine have to be the one to take up the mantle? That just discredits the whole Skywalker bloodline, which is what this whole series is about in the first place.
Yeah, and then it's like, well, I don't know what message they're trying to convey here, because Rey, she can't embrace who she is. I would have preferred she answer the question saying, she should have said just Rey, or she should have said I'm Rey Palpatine, and she is the new generation of Palpatine, of good guys, and she's changing the way that the name is perceived, and she's owning who she is. But no, she's still hiding she's hiding her lineage,
which is ironically a lot like Kylo Ren wants to
exactly
be something that she is not, and is constantly comparing herself to
all of
else.
These themes theoretically would weave together really well.
Yeah, well, we're finding parallels everywhere, right? And
you know, that's how George Lucas described it. You know, it's all parallels, it's all poetry, it's all supposed to, you know, interweave together, but it does interweave together to a certain extent, but it doesn't hold at all. So
just for something positive, as we're winding down here, I guess, a bit, John Williams is a genius. I watched all these movies, and I just love the music. I enjoy that so much.
Yeah, you know,
still holds up.
All these movies have phenomenal music, phenomenal themes. All the music associated with these new movies is fantastic.
The guy hasn't lost a step. That's what
he's amazing.
That's what made it feel the most like old Star Wars to me, is just hearing that music.
One of the greatest composers of all time. I'd say the greatest composer of all time. You know how many movies, soundtracks, and scores are his? Like Jaws is his too.
Jurassic Park.
Jurassic Park is his. That's two. He had, you know, let's look up. The
guy's
here.
A crazy musical genius, because you think something as memorable as Jaws is like two notes, and for him to just do something that simple and make it one of the most memorable musical pieces probably in history, like that takes skill just as much as his big grandiose pieces that blow everybody's mind.
Exactly. So John Williams is responsible for the music of Jaws, Star Wars, Jaws 2, Superman, 1979's Dracula, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Empire Strikes Back, E.T., Return of the Jedi, Indiana Jones, Temple of Doom, Superman 4, Indiana Jones Last Crusade, Home Alone 2, Jurassic Park, Schindler's List. You know, it's unbelievable, the track record. Even Saving Private Ryan, you know, Harry Potter. John Williams did Harry Potter.
And you think all those scores, they immediately come to your head when you hear them. Like, it's so memorable. Harry Potter is a really one in particular that's really memorable. Indiana Jones as well. Like, you hear, you know, those names, you immediately think of those songs. Like, so memorable.
And more recently, he just did The Fabelmans, which is great. You know, that's the movie about Steven Spielberg, directed by Steven Spielberg. So to have John Williams back together with him is great. He's a legend, man. And he's responsible for some of the greatest soundtracks of all time, period.
And I just wanted to give him a shout out because that's the one thing I felt positively about the whole time I was watching these movies. It's just the score. It's so well done.
I think my favorite of the new Star Wars things he did was Rey's theme. It's the song that's playing while she's scrapping on Jakku in the first film. It's just gentle and it's quiet, and I like it a lot. You know, John Williams is just
well, the vision too, right? Like, because I'd imagine he watches the movie and he has this little germ of an idea, but he has the vision to hear a full orchestra doing this massive piece. Like, most people don't have that vision. Most musicians don't have that kind of vision.
Yeah.
You know, most songs are written on like an acoustic guitar, and it doesn't go much further than that. You know.
Yeah.
So
that's
amazing.
That's something really amazing we can end off with. Is the soundtrack and the score to these new movies is on par with everything else, you know. But that's our thoughts on the most recent Star Wars trilogy. You know, we completely understand if you love these movies. If you love them, don't let us take that from you. Don't let anybody take that from you. You know, enjoy it.
Well, yeah, and I mean, the really little kids who are going to grow up with these movies, they're going to love them.
Yeah,
and they'll probably have great memories associated with them, even if they realize they're not that good.
Yeah,
you know, they'll still love them.
If anything, that's what you know, rebooting and re-franchising, restarting things. That's what it's all about. Is just bringing things back for a next generation to enjoy. Yeah,
because we have to admit, like, we tried to get friends to watch A New Hope.
Yeah.
Remember in like summer?
You can't.
And it's too old for them. Like it looks ridiculous to them. And I'm like, fair enough. It's not going to hold up the same to a lot of people.
But I don't know. Star Wars will, as I struggle saying it, will always be magical for me. Mm-hmm. But not for you. I know that.
Well, the original trilogy will always be magical and will always be, you know, mean a lot. But I'll be honest with you guys, I don't get too excited about new Star Wars anymore.
There's new Star Wars releasing every other day.
Yeah, and I feel like subconsciously I even knew it back then because I remember I didn't see Rogue One in the theater, and I didn't rush to see it.
Yeah.
And back then I wasn't saying I didn't like The Force Awakens, you know, but for some reason I just wasn't compelled to go see something else.
Yeah.
So
that's okay. We got what we wanted.
But we love Star Wars, believe it or not. So
we're unbelievably huge Star Wars fans. I have a Star Wars tattoo. You know, I'm a forever fan of Star Wars. No matter how hard they crash and burn, like I'll always keep those original movies close to my heart. So I don't think there's anybody listening right now that hasn't seen these Star Wars movies, but they have now all been spoiled, so you're welcome.
That's on you if you haven't seen them by now.
Yeah.
That's like Shakespeare. It's like mandatory. You got to see it. It's just ingrained to the culture. It's a religion at this point.
Yeah.
People driving around with little Jedi in the backseat on their car.
Pop culture icon, you know, and that's what we talk about here on The Slime is anything and everything pop culture related. And Star Wars is one of the greats. So I kind of like that we checked off our opinion on the new films. Mm-hmm. And we're definitely, we haven't discussed it, me and you, but I can confidently say we will do episodes on the prequels and the originals.
Oh, and they'll be massive and take so much preparation. They're going to be so much fun to do. That's down the line.
Because those are really special to us. But anyway, guys, that's all for this week. We hope you enjoyed listening to our Star Wars banter, us complaining about Star Wars for over an hour now. But, you know, we'll catch you next week on The Slime. Thank you so much for listening, and
bye.
Bye.
Mess that up.